You are listening to Radio VR in Washington. I'm Andrew Hiller. It's time to continue our look under America's armor at the social, economic, and political factors that shape our culture. In about 2 weeks, we'll be celebrating the 60th anniversary of Brown v. Board and the idea that separate is not equal. In a country which is growing more and more diverse, and with the demographic majorities even flipping in some states, it seems a perfect time to look into our schools. This week, let's start with the teachers. According to National Center of Education statistics, 82% of public and secondary teachers are white, 8% are Hispanic, and 7% are black, with about 2% Asian, according to a 2012 study. To look into the question of teacher diversity in our schools and whether it matters, we are joined by USC Professor of Law, Jody Armour. Hey, Jody.
Good to be back with you, Andrew.
While to a degree, the highest goal is to be completely colorblind, it's probably also very important to look into the mirror. What kind of lesson does it send to a child if through his educational career, almost all of his teachers are white?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that here at SC Law and in any other law school I could teach at, I've heard a number of my white students, a good number, tell me that I'm the first black teacher they've ever had in their lives. And now they are first-year law students by that time. So they've gone through all of grade school, middle school, high school, and college without ever having a black law professor, a black teacher, a black intellectual mentor. It's not until they get a law professor, and this is going to be a kind of fleeting moment because there aren't that many blacks in the legal academy either, really. So it is really kind of sobering to realize how segregated we are when we come to the educational experience and whether people see blacks in positions of intellectual authority. And since that is one of the most devastating stereotypes about blacks in current American society, namely doubts about and whispers about black intellectual inferiority, since that, and you have people like Charles Murray, who wrote The Bell Curve in '92, best-selling book at the time, saying that blacks are inherently intellectually inferior to whites innately, genetically, and Asians. When you have all of those cultural forces converging, it is important to push back against them as much as possible by having blacks and other socially marginalized minorities in the teaching profession being seen by the students as people who have knowledge, who can purvey knowledge, who are important cultural workers. And so I see what I do as in the classroom now here at the law school, being a black professor in front of a law school classroom, I see being that as just as important for my white students as for my black and Latino and Asian students, right? All students, I think they are. For my black students, it's important to have a kind of role model. We can get into that. For the other students, it's important to have their stereotypes challenged by having someone like me before them teaching. So there are lots of reasons that this is an important issue, Andrew. And I'll just point out one more. And this is, I think, the key issue here. The key reason why you have to have more people like me. I'm not, standing in front of, for example, black students or Latinos standing in front of Latino students. This is one of the most important reasons why I think Claude Steele's work. Claude Steele, who I think now is the chancellor of the UC system, he was a professor for years at Stanford, discovered what he called stereotype vulnerability or stereotype threat. And that dragged down the performance of black students in test-taking situations, standardized test-taking situations. He found that blacks performed at the same level as whites when the stereotype threat wasn't there, but they did perform well below whites when stereotype threat was relevant to the task at hand. So the reason he really gives for that difference in performance has to do with that worry that blacks have about their intellectual inferiority when it comes to test taking. They know they're not intellectually inferior, but they know there's a stereotype about them that says they are. And so they spend a lot of cognitive energy fighting that stereotype. To see this phenomenon in in the everyday world around us, Andrew, you and I talk about sports all the time, and now we're in the NBA playoffs. Look at the NBA playoffs. I think there you can see stereotype threat working in another way. Why is it that white players who are in the NBA tend to be from other countries? The great ones today, Nowitzki, Nash, Ginobili, the Gasol brothers, they tend to come from foreign countries. Why? Because perhaps out there they don't have the white men can't jump stereotype that's dragging down their performance and their aspirations and abilities even when it comes to playing in the States. They're freed from some of that. They've done studies in which they found that whites do better on math tests when they think they're being compared with other whites than when they think they're being compared with Asians. So whites can suffer from stereotype threats too. Women do better on math tests when they think they're being compared with other women than when they think they're being compared with men. So this phenomenon of stereotype threats is ubiquitous. The reason it's important in education to get more blacks in the classroom and more people from socially marginalized groups is to upend or to go after that stereotype threat, to have people see blacks, for example, being intelligent, being excellent, so that there's less rich, fertile soil for those kind of stereotypes to grow in. And in fact, there's a countervailing kind of set of experiences for them that push against those stereotypes. So I think that's one of the most important reasons to have diversity in the classroom for white as well as black, Latino, Asian students, for all students to have as much diversity as possible so we don't have those stereotype threats affecting so many of us.
So why aren't there more teachers? I know when I was a teacher, there was a huge shortage of teachers, not just minority teachers, but all teachers. And even today there still is, although because of many county shortfalls, there aren't as many job openings. But why aren't we finding these teacher roles being filled by minorities? Is it a matter of insufficient incentives to drive people into education?
Yeah, a large part of it, two reasons. I went to law school, and there are lots of people when to go to law school, for example, you want to get enough compensation to pay off your undergrad debt, for example, as well as what you're going to accumulate in grad school. But you want to be paid decently, and you want decent status, right? And when we start paying teachers less so that the best and brightest aren't attracted to the profession, and or we don't attach a lot of social status as we should to these purveyors of knowledge and molders of the future, we don't attach as much social status as there should be, we're going to have people going to other professions that pay more and that have more social status. And so this calls on us again to make a gut check of ourselves culturally, and to pay the price of our convictions by bringing the salaries of teachers into alignment with the great value that we say they have. We say they have value, but we don't want to pay them. We want them to suffer under the convenient social virtue of self-sacrifice and good Samaritanism, rather than give them what they deserve, given the amount of time they put in to getting their credentials and the efforts they put in the classroom. And we got to give them more social status, and that's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of an education crisis and a diversity gap in the classroom.
I have to admit that I left teaching for a myriad of reasons, some of which you just mentioned, so I think they're important to echo. There was the pay issue, there was the respect in the community issue. There was also the increasing number of roles that a teacher had to play. I had to be a lawyer and, confront some of these challenges that were becoming more. There were more and more bureaucratic and administrative pressures, paperwork. There was an incredible degree of apathy from the parents who were not willing to be a partner in the school relationship. Yeah. So I wonder, when we look at diversity in teaching, when we look at teaching itself, is it a micro, meso, or macro problem?
All of the above. And what you're saying is right. We're making schools the ladders of opportunity, the great equalizers. We say we make peace with our democratic kinds of impulses by saying, even if people are born in different stations in life, the educational system can equalize opportunities, and anybody can be great. Anybody can be Horatio Alger and rise thanks to our great education system. That's a lot of weight to put on an education system, but if you're going to do that, make that educational system capable of paying on, making good on those promises. For example, bring social workers into the school itself so that people like you, Andrew, teachers, can focus on the teaching and don't have to focus on all the things that a social worker needs to focus on, but that have to be addressed if the students are going to be able to learn in the classroom. So let's start dedicating resources that, especially in inner city neighborhoods and challenged neighborhoods and schools where the school systems are especially challenged, have lots of social support professionals in those schools, helping those students and their families, recognizing you can't help the student without also helping the family and seeing it a part of a holistic approach to making good on the democratic promise and the in the American kind of dream of anyone being able to rise and achieve greatness through the opportunity provided by an open educational system. Right. So, yeah, that is absolutely where we got to go next.
Looking under America's armor at why 82% of American public elementary and secondary teachers are white. I'm Andrew Hiller for Radio VR in Washington, and we've been joined by USC Professor of Law, Jody Armour.